Well, well, well. Look what finally decided to come in my mail today. The Valve Index is here, baby. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. You know what's crazy? Obviously, you guys can't see the perspective of this because it's obviously on the floor, but look at this. That's the Vive box. This is the Index box. Like, look how much bigger it is. Is the Index got that much more going for it? Or did they just decide to make it a much bigger box? Like, Jesus Christ. My name's Scyushi, and I've been using an OG HTC Vive for years. And not to say that it's necessarily bad or anything, but I thought it was about time we did an upgrade. I want to, of course, give a huge shout out and just say thanks to like all of you guys watching my videos and stuff, because otherwise, without your help, watching the videos, watching ads, buying the merch, all that shit, this would not be possible. This was my Christmas gift to myself. I ordered this December 2nd and it only just arrived today. Now there's multiple versions of the Index that you can buy online. Most of all, you can buy like the headset, the controllers, or the base station separately. Originally, I bought just the controllers, then I refunded them because like an idiot, I thought they would go on sale for some reason on Black Friday. And then right then, everything just went out of stock except for the entire package. So you could buy you could only buy the entire thing, otherwise everything else said it was out of stock. Now Steam has since changed it so that you can actually get notified when they have more in stock, but I'm happy that I ended up getting this. It does come with a copy of Half-Life Alyx, but it is not going to end up being unlocked until the game actually releases. This is a pretty weird box to open, dude. Like, I pretty much had to just cut the front of it and then, oh my gosh. No wonder it's in such a big box. That's so cool, dude. Like, the thing that I want to be clear about when I was saying how I was gonna, like, originally my plan was actually just to order the controllers on their own and then the headset later, because technically, because I am an HTC Vive owner, the good thing about the Index is that each individual part of it will actually work and configure with any other headsets that you already have. So these are the 2.1 or 2.0 base stations instead of the original ones that I have, which is the 1.0. As far as I'd read online, there is no difference between these for something like my setup. Like, as you can see, like I don't really have that much space for a VR setup. I just pretty much have the living room. But these 2.0 trackers apparently are really, really good the more space you have. So I don't know if I'm going to see much of a difference between the base stations detecting me. I mean, it's not like I'm going to be able to determine if it's the base stations that are having better detection or just the Index headset itself. But this is so cool, dude. I'm so stoked about this. These controllers are the big thing that I wanted because these are such a huge upgrade for me from the Vive controllers. I did read online that apparently the joystick, I think it's the push-in button, like on the joystick, apparently that was like dying right away with the Knuckle controllers. That's what they call these. And the whole trick is that I have a suspicion that Valve ended up delaying the indexes that they were sending out because they were probably rebuilding all of their controllers from scratch. Because otherwise, anyone that had complaints about the controller issue would obviously just have to send the controllers in to end up getting them fixed. Now, the thing that's so cool about this, and I'll show you guys a little bit later in the video, the Index controllers actually detect individual finger movement. So I'm really excited for that because apparently it means that with games that actually support it, I can literally just hold the controller to hold like a sword, for example, instead of on the Vive controllers, there's actually a little grip button right here. And usually you have to toggle that on and off whenever you're trying to grip stuff in the games and everything like that. Now, you might be wondering, well, how does the controller detect your fingertips? Like, if I just let go of the controllers and again fall out of my hands? Not necessarily, because there's actually this strap here. You can tighten that around your knuckle so that when I let go, the controller is still on my hand. I wanted this because it was such a significant upgrade from my OG Vive, but I don't know if it's going to be that significant of an upgrade. If you have like the Vive Pro or something like that, then this might not be worthwhile. So we seem to have a weird little Velcro box in there. It says like Hello World. I don't know what this is. I'm going to assume it's just, yeah, it looks like it's just papers and junk. So maybe it's the instructions. I'm fairly confident that I know how to set this up. because this VR headset should be the same as pretty much anything. And I wanted to also not only just have an unboxing video for you guys, but also a setup guide afterwards, because I've had so many people in like my Discord and comments and stuff always really confused about how exactly you end up setting up a VR headset. Basically what we're going to be doing with these is I'm going to be sitting right in the middle of the room, and I'm going to have these two on stands looking down at me. So these are essentially detecting the headset so that it can end up telling my range of motion in the games. One thing that I strongly disagree with Valve doing with this thing is these right here, these earphones are actually speakers. They're not headphones, which to a content creator doesn't make that much sense. But as far as the headset is concerned, I think that it's for more immersion, because then everybody that's watching you play the VR can understand what's going on. But on top of that, you're going to have a better understanding of, like, I don't know, it's gonna sound like it's in the room, I guess. Maybe it was cheaper than them putting like good headphones on it, but I'm gonna rip these bad boys off and then just end up using the headphone jack. There's also this little opening right here, which apparently has no function right now. It's most of all for modders, but we can end up putting this nice little shadow, like sunglasses thing on the front of it, and yeah. Okay, so looking at the headset, I've got a couple worries. Most of all, the biggest worry that I have right now is apparently, and I was reading up about this online as well, but the wiring itself, one is going to plug into my video card, the other one is going to plug into a USB 3 slot, and then another is going to end up plugging into a power adapter. Now the thing is that the Vive actually comes with this little box right here, which is kind of an adapter, so you can plug your HDMI, USB, and then your power, and then have all of that coming out into separate wires in the back, right? It's a lot more convenient than what I think Valve is wanting me to do, where I would extend these cables and kind of have them tangling all over the place just to end up plugging them into each of the individual slots. So maybe I'll end up using this, because as far as I know, this is USB 3 as well, so I shouldn't really have a problem with using it. But let's move a little bit forward here and talk about the headset itself, because ooh boy, this thing is amazing so far. I got to mess with it a little bit while I was waiting for my camera to adjust and charge up. First of all, these little headphone pieces, unfortunately, I'll probably, why does it look so dark? I hope it's not too dark. I'll have to change that in editing. These little headphone pieces, unfortunately, in order for me to detach them, it looks like I'm going to have to actually unscrew them. Let me tell you, especially over the HTC Vive, the headset itself is extremely comfortable and way easier to pop on, because I literally just put it onto my eyes, pop this sucker down, and then I just adjust the tightness a little bit, and then there you go. And then this knob on the front of it, I can't actually really show you guys a very good example of it. Maybe I can. So what this is doing on the right side is actually adjusting how close the eyepieces are to your eyes. And then there's also going to be this knob right down here. And this one is going to adjust how close the eyepieces are to one another. So this one apparently is about image clarity, whereas this one is just about your own field of view. It pretty much seems to be the same weight as my HTC Vive, but I really like this material. It's so much nicer than the foam that the Vive has on the headset itself. And I mean, obviously all my comparisons are going to be to the Vive just because I have the most experience with it. But it looks like we've got the chargers for the controllers. This is probably for wall mounting the base stations. So what you can do is you can actually just mount these to the wall looking down at you, or put them down on the floor looking up at you. I already have these two separate lighting poles that I ordered online. Those are my base stations for my Vive, so I'm probably going to just swap those to the Index ones. And this is most of all what I wanted to show you guys, because this right here is actually going to end up going on the back of your head in the headset. So it's kind of like for people that have smaller heads. I guess the point is, because I mean, even my girlfriend doesn't have a head this tiny, but this I think is for younger people to end up playing VR, which honestly isn't recommended, because if kids are like way too young to play VR, I mean, look up all the health shit online, but ultimately it's really, really unhealthy for kids to end up playing VR for long periods of time. So, okay, so inside the box that is labeled for the headset, it seems like this is actually just the AC adapter. So It's just for the power. It doesn't seem like it's coming with, I mean, I'll still have to go through the box before we start setting up, but it seems like we're pretty close to being able to just set up the Index. I don't know why they have this little attachment to it. It's kind of weird. All right, so here's everything else that ended up coming in the box. That was on the underneath side. So we got the headset, and then we've got the AC power to the headset. The wires are automatically just attached to the headset itself. Then there is the controllers themselves, which I found this little add-on here for a wrist strap. I don't fully trust just relying on the knuckles, especially with how expensive these are. So I'm gonna definitely be using the wrist strap. I don't know if I'm supposed to be attaching it down there, but it seems to work. Then we've got power for the base station. Oddly enough, they have this separate weird cord, and then this end plugs into yet another one of these weird AC box things. And then we got the other one for the other base station, and then the 2 USB charging cables for the knuckle controllers, which just plugs right into the bottom. Can you focus, camera? Right into the bottom right there. So now all I've got to do is set up the base stations on these bad boys and then plug them in. You know, I actually just realized that while I was taking down like one of these base stations, they're compatible with the Index. So technically speaking, I wouldn't have to actually set up the 2.0 base stations in order to just try this sucker out. That said, even though originally, like I said, I didn't plan on upgrading the base stations, I did afterwards realize that there's 2 extra options that I get by having the extra base stations. One is that I can sell my Vive, so I can end up actually taking that off of the price of the Index. And 2, potentially, if I did keep my Vive, it means that I would be able to actually do some co-op VR games. Yeah, the only complaint I kind of have with these base stations that I'm hoping that the 2.0 takes care of is sometimes these will end up losing track of me, and then I go into what I like to call the VR void. So while my headset is still there, my screen actually just turns gray for a little bit just because these base stations lose track of me. Now, apparently the 2.0 stations are supposed to be a lot better at just detecting your actor and seeing where you're at. So I'm really hoping that these are going to end up making a significant difference. But as I said earlier in the video, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to determine whether or not it's the base stations that are having a better experience for me, or if it's just the fact that I'm having a wholehearted upgrade to the entire headset. Okay, so look at this, guys. Shame on you, Valve. Shame on you. So this is the AC adapter for the Vive base stations, right? Sideways, because it's actually smart. I mean, sure, it's clunky and big. Here's the one from the Index. So I gotta plug this in like straight rather than sideways, like, good God. So these cords are definitely a lot longer than the Vive ones though. Like, see how much extra slack I've got? The Vive ones usually just stretch out to pretty much here. The only other thing that I would say is a bit of a complaint is that I have to plug this in every time, which kind of means I have to reach around in order to make sure that I press it in properly, right? But the whole point is you cannot put any fingerprints on this screen if you want to end up having the base station detect you properly. Okay, so we got yet another problem here. For fuck's sakes, Valve. So remember when I was saying that I would be able to potentially end up using this little adapter box that came with my Vive? I can't, because this is an HDMI slot, and the port that is on the Index is not HDMI, it's whatever the heck this thing is called. I forget what it's called, but it's like a little higher than HDMI, I don't know. The problem is that I only have 2 of these slots on my graphics card right now. I have the 2080 Ti, which unfortunately doesn't have nearly as many graphics slots or video slots as other graphics cards that I've used in the past. Never mind, gamers, we're actually in luck. So here's my cables for my monitors, and right underneath here there's actually another one of those slots. You can see it right in the back right there. So thankfully I think we're good. I think we just have enough ports. Here's also something else that is, I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but this is actually the same wire for the Index I can actually unplug it from the rest of the headset. So that means potentially I just have to unplug this one cord and can leave the rest of everything else plugged in. And then I just plug this in anytime I want to end up turning the headset on. So now I just got to plug the headset in, like the AC adapter, and then we'll actually be able to go through the SteamVR room setup thing. Except that once again, thanks to some dumbass over at Valve, again, this is the Vive. It plugs in sideways. This is the Index, which would plug in like this. So that means that I have to plug the power in here, and then I gotta have the cord go all the way around there to my other power bar. All right, so far so good. The computer's recognized each individual part, and there's updates available for everything, so I'm just gonna update all those. And then this is going to end up being the Steam Room VR setup. So you can set it up for room scale, but you can also set it up for standing only. Standing only obviously is if you don't have that much room. I set it up for room scale, even though technically speaking, I don't have room scale sizes. At the least, it means that when we end up going into the program, and I'll show you in a bit, we are literally going to be using the controller to track an arena for us. And then in the VR itself, you will physically be able to see a wall pop up. How intrusive the wall is entirely up to the settings that you end up choosing, but it can be either more intrusive or less intrusive, just in case you're playing, just in case you think that you're more experienced with VR and know most of all about spacing, because I'd say that's the biggest thing. I mean, especially with me, because you can see like literally right here, I try to keep my back at this at all times because, I mean, there's my big TV. If I swing in that direction, I'm going to break something. Another thing that I have an advantage of is I've actually got this gamer floor pad thing. I shouldn't have got a black one because it shows all the dog hair like crazy, but I can literally just leave this in the middle of my room. And then anytime anyone's playing VR, I just distinctly tell them, like, if you get anywhere too close to the edge of the mat, it means that you're in trouble. Generally speaking, my biggest advice to you guys, if you're playing VR for the first time, is to just take it slow. Remember very, very carefully that the game that you're playing is not as important as the things that you're doing in real life. So while we're updating the software, I thought that I would take the opportunity to show you guys my biggest comparisons between the Index and the Vive. So that's the Vive, that's the Index. The headsets themselves are fairly similar. And most of all, I want to act as a bit of a voice of reason for anyone that has an OG HTC Vive and is wondering whether or not they should end up actually making the upgrade, like taking the plunge. Now, originally when I bought the HTC Vive, I think it was like around $800. That might have been American. I don't entirely remember, but I am Canadian, so obviously it was fairly expensive. Whereas the Index is really expensive. Now, the thing is, with the individual parts working and being compatible with other headsets and other controllers and stuff like that, I could recommend that if you're on the fence and you're entirely unsure about whether or not you want like the headset itself, get the controllers for sure, because that's going to be the biggest difference. But I'll talk about that in a minute. Immediately, the two headsets versus each other. Obviously, I haven't gone into a game yet, so I can't tell you, but the comfortability is just A+. Like, my God, that thing is so comfortable. I really, really am excited to start playing some games with the Index and see how long I can end up playing them. Because with the Vive, the headset is a little bit heavier. It's not like this is super duper light, but my God, is it comfortable, dude. Like, you have no idea, especially with all the mesh and everything like that. What I mentioned earlier about being able to adjust the headset with just this. So with the Vive, you actually have to unvelcro this and then tighten it and then Velcro it back up. On top of that, the comfortability of the headset is just this. So this is just the little cushioning that goes on your face. That's pretty much it. You can replace that, but that's the thing is then you're constantly dealing with replacing the foam and everything like that over and over. And then otherwise the headset itself, you can see, is just a lot more cluttered because they have all of the different wiring coming out of the headset right here, and then it goes over the head, out the back, and then it's all one wire, as opposed to the Index, which looks so much cleaner because everything is actually just coming out of here instead of just right out of the top of the headset, and it comes out immediately as one wire. So it still has all these different wires in here, but this is like tying them all together type of thing. The only thing that I would say, again, I still can't stand the idea that they had these speakers instead of headphones, especially for somebody like myself where I'm a content creator. Obviously, I can't have speakers blaring while I'm trying to record my voice out of a microphone. And on top of that, I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen. Like, Windows is going to have a heyday trying to figure out which speakers I'm trying to use. Those two versus each other, I mean, obviously it's going to be a substantial upgrade from the OG HTC V, or HTC, bleh, from the old school Vive. But if you have a more higher end VR headset, then maybe going up to the VR headset of the Index isn't really going to end up being that big of a difference. However, these bad boys are going to have a huge difference from one another. So first of all, you might be sitting here wondering why my controller looks so stupid and bulky. That's because I've actually got some third-party accessories. So this right here is actually just like a big plastic covering. It does actually keep the grip of the controller in your hand a lot better than just the normal vanilla. Like, without this, it's just this very slippery material, so you can end up having it fall out of your hands pretty quickly. And then this, I would say, is a godsend. This thing right here, I actually did a video review on all of this stuff already because they ended up contacting me because they knew I had a VR Vive controller and they had these accessories. They sent them to me. I did a video on it. It was great because what this is quite literally, it goes in between the controller, because normally this is the Vive controller right here. And then this is just an attachment so that it can end up being shock absorbent. And I can't tell you how many times I am 100% certain that this has saved the controller. Now, the design of the Vive controllers themselves is it's pretty good for one of the first VRs, that's for sure. You know, I was pretty blown away when I first ended up playing with this, but you can see immediately how much bigger it is than the Index controllers. Over long periods of time, depending on the game that you're playing, it can actually become very strenuous on your hands to end up holding these controllers, especially because the buttons themselves are so awkward and out of place. So here's that grip button that I was talking about before. Depending on the way that the game is designed, usually it'll be a toggled grip. So you press the button and then your character is holding a weapon or whatever, and then you'll press it again and then your character will drop it. The trigger's fine. You know, it's got enough sensitivity to it, but I mean, it's a trigger, so it's not like there's any complaints about it. This is the menu button. It's a bit of an awkward place for some people, especially because I've got, I don't know if I'd say I have large hands, but I at least have above average hands, because I know that especially my girlfriend and some of my friends have had a lot of issues trying to hit this button up here, especially because sometimes you'll just have the controller down here, because this is your touchpad, this is your joystick, as it were, right? So trying to hit this while you're in the middle of a game and have the controller resting comfortably in a position so that you can end up using the joystick, I mean, yeah, it's not very ergonomic, I guess I would say. This is the button, the system button. So this will usually take you to the SteamVR menu separated from the game. A lot of times my girlfriend would accidentally end up hitting that button just because of where it's placed. The touchpad itself works fine for movement. Usually there will be different options in games where you can just have your thumb on the touchpad and then it detects where you're moving based on the placement of it, and it's just as a touchpad. That's fine. Sometimes you have to push it in though, and the thing is that this is going to essentially be 4 different buttons. So there's up, down, left, and right. One thing that I noticed immediately is both of my Vive controllers, my left and right hand, it doesn't matter because they're both essentially the same thing and they can swap as many times as you want, as opposed to these which have dedicated hand placement. The right side died immediately, and then I read on forums that lots of people were having issues where the right button for the touchpad ended up dying right away. So there you go in a nutshell. That's going to end up being the Vive controllers. Obviously, I have a lot to say about those, especially just because they're so uncomfortable and ungodly. Immediately, this is way lighter, even just holding it casually in my hand, but then let alone the fact that it is going to end up wrapping around my knuckle and is just so much more ergonomic, has a proper joystick as well as a touchpad. This touchpad, I don't know how far it goes. I think it's just a matter of placing your thumb there, but it also has an A and B button. It's just night and day how good this thing is. And then I think this little button right here is the system button now. If there's anything you're going to upgrade from the Vive, the controllers, 100%. All right, so let's start setting up the room scale VR. This is going to be extremely intuitive. Even when I was first learning the VR, it was just so much easier to set it up than I thought it would be. It quite literally shows you this graphic image of, you know, move all of your shit out of the way, make sure everything's nice and clear and you got all the spacing. And then this next step is quite literally the base stations trying to track the VR headset and the controllers. So what I gotta do right now, I'm doing off camera, is I'm actually just unplugging the controllers and placing them into the middle of the room so that the base stations can end up detecting everything, right? And I gotta make sure that the controllers are actually on. Then I click next and we're already good to go. Now it's telling me to use one of the controllers, point it towards my monitor, and then pull the right trigger. So it's just so that it can end up detecting where my computer is actually located. I just did that right now. Now the next step it wants us to do is calibrate the floor. So you just put your controllers on the floor, click calibrate floor, leave the controllers there, nothing to it. So now this is where we're going to end up setting our boundaries. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll go to the next step and you'll be able to see right here that the green in the center is actually the headset and the controllers. And then these two green dots in the corner are the base stations. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up the right controller. You can see it actually moving right now. And I'm going to pull the right trigger, and I'm essentially going to be drawing an invisible line in my room of what my setup is. So this way, the base stations are going to end up knowing where the wall is and just how far I can end up going. And then this is essentially what it ends up drawing for itself. We can go into the advanced mode and kind of clear it up and set up different boundaries and stuff like that. This, like I mentioned earlier, is actually pointing in the direction of my TV. So I like to always edit and flip that around so that my back is facing against my TV. And there you go. That's it. So now it's actually a few hours later. Sorry to have ditched you guys, but I wanted to get some hands-on experience with the controller and headset. Overall, I have my criticisms about it, but I also would say, without a doubt, is it better than the HTC Vive? Yes, most definitely. And is it worth the asking price? Yeah, probably. The controllers themselves are going to take me a long time to get used to. I think it also depends on how they're implemented into whatever game you're playing. As far as my own experience with it for hours on end, I'd say that the controllers I probably have on a little bit too tight because I found that they were getting to be a little bit uncomfortable over time. Just you might be able to still see the marking on my hand of where the knuckle was located. Other than that, the controllers are still going to take me a while to get used to, even just with the button placement and the joysticks themselves. The headset itself I found ran hotter than the Vive. I was sweating a lot more than I did with normal VR games, and I found that my head was getting a lot hotter, or my face was. And I think that that's because the foam that they have on the Index was a lot more comfortable, yes, but it didn't have as much circulation as something like the Vive. Field of view was definitely a lot better. I could actually have a lot more, I could see a lot more out of my peripherals than I could with the Vive headset. Not to mention, the Index actually goes to a full-on 144 hertz, I think. So it has a higher refresh rate, which means potentially higher frame rate. And I noticed that made a big, big difference when I was playing games. The base stations, however, that's just a waste of money. Obviously, I can say without a doubt that if you're upgrading from the Vive, all you need is the controller and headsets. I had these base stations doing the exact same shit on me, where my controller would sometimes lose detection and fly off into outer space and stuff like that. Generally, I didn't notice better tracking, is what I'm trying to say. So I think quite literally the same description that I read about these is that it's better if you have a bigger space for your play space. As far as the rest of the hardware, I still have my criticisms. I think that the earphones, do I say ear speakers, I guess? Those are just a fucking waste of time and space. Like, those don't even need to be on the stupid thing. Windows didn't even automatically detect the audio source, so I was still just using my speakers, and I mean, I'm already used to what I'm used to, and I would rather just be using headphones if I was ever playing VR. As I'm kind of taking it all apart and taking it down, I'm realizing that the Index actually does a great job with cleanup. Now, in the event that I would be able to just leave these here static without moving them around, the biggest thing is that the base stations themselves, you usually got to end up unplugging them. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I was kind of worried that I would have to plug this in every time, which could very well be an issue as well. But
the AC adapter actually has this wire detachable. So I can simply just boop, pop that out, and then it's not drawing any more power. And then potentially I could just leave that right there. Same with the headset itself. It's just got the deattaching cable itself right here, and then I could just wrap that up. Anyways, you can definitely expect me to play some more games on the channel that are VR related. I just generally like VR games no matter what. And it's gonna take me a while to get used to the controllers. So maybe you'll see some videos while I'm still on training wheels trying to get used to it. But I think I'm gonna end up kind of testing it out, getting myself used to it all before I end up doing some more VR videos for you guys. But anyways, at least now I'm prepared for Half-Life Alyx, right? Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, or hit that join button down below. Sayonara, and stay epic, gamers.